All right. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Sherry Buffington. She is a psychologist specializing in the area of motivation and performance. She's been doing this work for over 30 years and is the author of several books and a speaker and presenter and a developer of multiple programs and multiple tools in the performance and motivation space. So it's always my pleasure. And she's most importantly a 20 plus year friend and mentor and teacher of mine. So it's always a pleasure and honor to share the stage with her. My name is Kevin Stoffel. I'm the founder and owner of a coaching and consulting practice called Strong People Systems. I've been doing this work for about 20 years, and I specialize in pre-hire talent screening and in people development, specifically in the areas of emotional intelligence and leadership development. So we want to thank everybody for joining us this morning, and hopefully that you get something out of this session today. So real quickly, we call this program the ABCs of Emotional Intelligence and Leadership Development. And the ABC stands for awareness, better choices, and caring. We really see those as the building blocks for all leadership. The more we can expand our awareness to the possibilities of things that are available to us, the better choices we can make. The better choices we make, and do so with a caring attitude, both caring for ourselves, but also caring for the other people that are impacted by our choices or by our decisions. That's where true leadership begins and starts. And it always starts with leading ourselves well. So we really consider the topics that we're covering during this series as the foundational building blocks for becoming leading with emotional intelligence and becoming a better leader. And Sherry developed this model she calls the ACE effect, based on that, which is awareness. The more we expand it, the greater awareness, the better choice we can make. And life is just really a series of choices, right? Or a series of decisions. It's a binary code. Everything we face in life is a choice. We can either do the right thing or do the wrong thing, or don't do the wrong thing. But every choice that we make has an effect. And if we do the right thing or don't do the wrong thing, that effect has an effect on our energy. We can feel our energy go up, we can feel our energy go down, or we can feel our energy be stuck. But our choices affect our energy, and our energy affects everything that our outcomes in life. So every time we expand our awareness, make a choice, and do so with a caring approach, and doing so with a caring approach is always the right thing to do. So life is just a series of decisions. It's a binary code. It's either do or don't do. Whereas the wise philosopher Yoda from Star Wars used to say, said, do or don't do. There is no try.
I say try is an acronym for totally resigned to yielding. So if we're saying I'll try, then we're resigned to yielding. Do or don't do.
So here's some interesting information about life as a series of decisions. That it's estimated that we make approximately 35,000 decisions per day. And some people go, wow, that's a huge number. But you think about it, everything we do is a decision. Do we decide to get out of bed or not in the morning? We decide what to wear. We decide if we're going to brush our teeth or not. We decide, what we're going to have for breakfast. We decide, when we walk into the grocery store, if we're going to turn right or if we're going to turn left. It's decision after decision after decision. So that can be kind of overwhelming if we think about being decisive. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to make so many decisions every day. But the good news is that approximately 95% of those decisions are made at the subconscious level because, they're made out of habit, right? We don't really think about whether we're going to get out of bed. Our alarm goes off and we get out of bed. We walk into the bathroom, we brush our, we grab the toothpaste and put it on our toothbrush and we brush our teeth. We walk into the grocery store and our habits, dictate, we walk into the grocery store and we always turn to the right and make the loop, starting from the right-hand side versus the left-hand side.
Think of the number of decisions you make driving a car.
Yeah.
And most of those are subconscious.
Yeah. So that's the good news, is that we don't have to think about most of them. And that's also the reality is that, this topic today is about decisiveness. And we're already decisive, right? We make 95% of our decisions very decisively. And we don't, to the point where we don't even have to think about them. We just do them. So every one of us is decisive, even though we might consciously think that we're not, or question whether we are or we not are or not. The other good news is that when you think about it, generally speaking, there's only a handful of decisions on any given day that are truly important decisions. that, affect our business, affect our life, are truly legitimate, important decisions. Estimates are somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 decisions a day, that have real impact or real meaning in our lives. So we're not trying to boil the ocean here with becoming decisiveness. It's not an overwhelming, insurmountable problem. We only have to really figure out, how do we handle those 5 to 10 decisions a day to become more decisive? And that's a very doable, achievable task or challenge in front of us to become more decisive. Sherry, you want to talk to this a bit?
Sure. The ability to effectively recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and recognize, understand, and effectively influence the emotions of others is emotional intelligence. Many people lack that. It's a process of development. And Plato, more than 3,000 years ago, said, above all else, or know thyself, right? He didn't say only know thyself. He said above all else. So the first thing that we should be doing is knowing who we are, which is knowing who we are authentically. Authentic self-awareness and awareness of the motivators, needs, communication styles, etc., of other people is how we develop emotional intelligence. And again, it's a process that we don't come into the world with it, as you've probably noticed with children who throw temper tantrums. But it's vital to being highly effective, especially as a leader.
So
Today, we're covering decisiveness, and that's one of the relationship building actions or functions. So the primary thing, the reason people follow a leader is because they trust them. And trust is this whole list of things, decisiveness being a very big piece among them. So that's what we're going to be covering today, is the decisiveness factor.
Yeah. And we've already covered in previous sessions, we've covered the topics listed above that, decisiveness. And in future sessions, next session, we'll be covering self-leadership and then effective communication and problem solving and change management and so forth. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a roadmap as to what we'll be covering in future months throughout the course of the rest of this year in this monthly program. So this is interesting in that when you go out and do a little bit of research on, what is the advice for being more decisive? It's very superficial, very, undoable really, because it gives us these ideas. It doesn't tell us how or what to do. It just gives us ideas that are very vague and hard to implement if we don't know how.
And if you look at these, like Kevin said, they're surface things, but this is what to do, not how to do it. Of these, the most effective step here is to make small decisions. And we'll talk about why that's a good choice. All of these are good ideas if you knew how to do them. So how do you get with don't fear mistakes? How do you get there? What does try different processes mean? And these are things, again, we went out and did research on multiple things. I sent Kevin a list last night from Anthony Robbins, which is very similar to this. And it's the reason people don't take an action, because we can know what to do, but if we don't know how to do it, then we can't get there.
Yeah. I like the, number 6, try different processes. What processes, learn how to narrow down your options. Well, how do I do that? Kind of thing. So it's just very, very vague and very superficial, very surface level. So what we hope to do today is take it to a deeper level based on the psychology of what really drives fundamental human behavior.
So if we understand what causes indecisiveness, now we know what to focus on. We know what to look at in ourselves. So at the top of this list is the stress response. And when people are stressed, everyone's brain does exactly the same thing. It's a human function. So under stress, the brain sees stress as a threat. It's a fight, flight, or freeze threat. And so what happens in the brain is the amygdala fires up, starts burning energy, and the way the brain balances out that energy burn is to reduce the function of the prefrontal cortex, which is all of your executive functions. And as those executive functions reduce, the typical response to that is we look at ourselves and we see that we're not being as decisive, as clear, we're not making as good a decisions as we know we're capable of. We're not planning, we're not strategizing, our brain isn't functioning like we know it can. And our first response to that is to look at that behavior, the effect, and to start trying to focus on the effect, the cause, versus the cause. So the effect is reduced executive functions. And if we're focused on the effect, we then get critical of ourselves. And the bad part of that is when we get critical, that just increases our stress. And now we're in this downward cycle where our stress is going up, the amygdala is burning even hotter, the executive functions are reducing even further. And there's no way out of that except to notice the cause. And the cause is stress. So if we recognize that stress is the cause of that reduced executive functions, now we can focus on reducing stress. And so when we're looking at it that way, we don't beat ourselves up for being stressed. We just say, okay, what can I do to reduce stress? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about is what do you do to reduce your stress levels? The critic versus coach, that's where we often go when we are looking at our brain not functioning like we think it is when we're under stress. So you want to cover some of that, Kevin? We talked about the critic is the one telling you you can do better than this. What is your problem? Why aren't you thinking well? Why aren't you making good decisions? You know you can do this. This is the critic.
Yeah, it's beating ourselves up. And then the next thing is we lack of courage. And lack of courage comes from the lack of clarity, lack of on what our expectations are, or lack of self-confidence or self-esteem. Self-confidence is our confidence in our ability to do something, and self-esteem is are we worthy of it? Are we worth the effort? Kind of thing. And if we lack any of those things, that's why we lack courage.
Yeah. And so if we start coaching ourselves, if you do for others, or if you do for yourself what your most leaders are good at doing for others, coaching them, then it changes your energy. It changes how you feel about where you are in the moment. So if I were my own best coach, what would I be saying to myself? That's a question you want to ask. And so notice when you're criticizing yourself and step into that coach space. If I were my own best coach, what would I be saying to myself?
Yeah.
The cop mindset is we have all motivation is about moving away from pain and toward pleasure, reducing pain, increasing pleasure. The pain principle in your brain is your protector. The pleasure principle in your brain is your champion. And if you step into that energy space, you can see that the critic gone too far is actually the protector. It's that part of your brain trying to protect you, keep you safe. The champion is the part of us that says you can do this. And sometimes we have both of those in competition with each other. The protector's trying to protect you, the champion's trying to move you forward, and so we're stuck. In the middle, between those two, is the observer. The observer, when we step into observer space, we're stepping away from emotion. Both the protector and the champion are emotionally based functions. And the observer steps away from emotion and looks at things through the eyes of wisdom. And if we can use the observer to bridge the energy of the champion and the energy of the protector so they're aligned, then we have a much better outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And anytime the champion and the protector are not lacking cooperation, we end up being stuck or we end up being indecisive, right?
Mhm.
That's the whole the whole idea of being stuck is we're not making a decision to do,
Right.
to do something.
Right.
Because
And
we got
when
this
they're in
internal tug of war going on.
right. And when they're in conflict is, do I do what the protector's urging me to do, or do I do what the champion's urging me to do? Right. And if there's no alignment between the two, both of them might feel extreme.
And they're both of those extremes are driven by emotion,
Mhm.
right? And it becomes very emotional, stressful for us. Oops. So to address the cause, which is there's four things we're going to talk about in detail. First, we need to be able to recognize and manage the stress. We're going to talk a little bit about that in more detail. We got to give you some ideas on how to become your own best coach, some ideas and tips on how to practice courageous acts, and ways to develop the COP awareness mindset. So we're going to go into each of those four in a little bit more detail here.
So a lot of people, especially people in leadership roles, tend to push through stress. They tend to ignore it until it just gets so they become so exhausted or so frustrated they have to look at it. And at that point, they're often beyond managing it. So in order to manage stress, you need to become aware of it in an early stage. And early on, your body is going to tell you something every single time. And I'll give you an example. Kevin and I have talked about this. For me, my first indication that I'm moving towards stress is shoulder tension. So, and it's not in my shoulders, it's like between my shoulder blades. And so I know that when I feel that, I need to take a break. I need to go do something to reduce my stress levels. Kevin says that his is, what is it in your stomach, Kevin?
Just a feeling like I got a pit, something going on in the pit of my stomach.
So if you notice and if you think of a stressful situation and you notice how your body responds, not what your brain is thinking, but how your body responds, something happens in your body early on. And if you are aware of that, if you again expanding your awareness, if you know that means that your stress levels are going up, then you can take a break, and it should be a break that is energizing or relaxing or fun, so that and you'll feel when your stress reduces. You'll feel because your brain kicks back in and your energy levels go up. But if you can be aware of that early stress indicator, it's really important, because at that point you're in control. You're not out of control yet. So rather than pushing past it, take a break. And I've had leaders for years tell me that that was a very important piece of advice to them, because when your plate's full and you have so many things that you need to be doing, the thought of taking a break seems counterintuitive and counterproductive. It's the most productive thing you can do. And the reason it's the most productive thing you can do is that when you reduce your stress levels, you'll come back to what it is you were working on at the time. You'll have more energy. You'll be thinking more clearly. You'll make better decisions, and you'll get more done in less time, and you'll enjoy it more. So there's a lot of reasons why you should take that break and reduce your stress levels.
Yeah. The key to this one is identifying your early stress indicator. What is it, that physiological indicator that goes on in your body that says I can feel I'm becoming stressed. So you need to identify that so that you become aware of it. Anytime that starts coming up for you, then you can say, I'm still in control. I'm aware of that. I'm still in control. I can make the conscious level decision before my body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode to do something, take a break, do something fun, relaxing, or energizing. That may just be, getting up and walking around the office, or maybe, getting up and walking around the block. It may, you know, call call a friend, pick up the phone, call a friend. Um, Whatever it is to disrupt that stress cycle that turns into a downward spiral.
And it doesn't have to be long. It can be 20 minutes. It can be, it can be like Kevin said, just to walk around the block, just to get up and do something to reduce your stress.
All right.
So being your own best coach. If you notice your thought processes when we start criticizing, when we get into when the protector starts talking and it moves into critic space in order to manage outcomes to keep you safe. If you notice what you're thinking, what you're saying to yourself, if what you're saying to yourself sounds critical, then shift your thinking, shift it to, again, what would you say or do as your own best coach? So, okay, and so our thinking is, okay, I'm in critical mode. I'm in critic mode now. I'm criticizing myself. I'm giving myself critical advice, and that's not useful. So if you shift your thinking and you go into coach space, what would I do, say, or do as my own best coach? And that's simply a mind shift.
You know, another way to think about that too, I oftentimes think about it is if one of my employees was coming to me asking, with an issue or whatever, how would I coach them, or one of my kids, or my best friend, or something like that. We're very good at coaching other people, but we're terrible at coaching ourselves because we let the emotional get into it and the emotion take over and hijack us. But if we just, to shift our mindset, it's like if I was coaching my best friend on this problem, what would I tell him to do or her to do?
Right, you wouldn't likely say, well, you're just being really stupid. That's just not, why are you not being
Right.
smart? That's the conversations we have with ourselves, but we wouldn't have that with a friend.
Yeah. So that to me is a way to shift my thinking, is how would I coach my friend or a coworker or an employee or somebody else, because yeah, we're much more likely to be critical of ourselves than we are of somebody else.
So if to understand and manage fear, there are a couple of things about fear. We often hear that fear is false evidence appearing real. That's only true if it's illegitimate fears, if they're not legitimate. So we need to understand what's a legitimate fear and what is not legitimate, and separate those two, because the non-legitimate fears are things we can change with our thinking and our focus. So the biggest legitimate fears are the unknown. We were born with that fear. We will die with it. It is a survival mechanism. So the subconscious mind will never move you into the unknown. There will always be resistance around an unknown. So if you don't know, for example, who you are authentically, or what you want in your future, the future is an unknown and you're going to avoid going into it. It's what keeps a lot of people from moving forward. And also then real danger is a real legitimate fear. If you're standing at the edge of a um, abyss and there's no rail to keep you from falling over and the wind's blowing pretty hard and you're feeling fear, that's a really good reason to feel fear. Or if you're in heavy traffic and there's a car careening towards you and you're feeling fear, that's a really good reason to be fearful. It gives you the opportunity to react quickly. But illegitimate fears, our three biggest illegitimate fears are ridicule, rejection, and embarrassment. We'll do almost anything to avoid those things. And the reality is nobody ever died from ridicule, rejection, or embarrassment. So the feelings of those. It can be the unknown, but when it's the unknown, it's an unknown that you could know if you just do some research. It's an easily known unknown. So if we choose not to make the decision to discover something that we could discover, then that could be also an illegitimate fear. But when we're addressing those and we know the difference between the two. So I use an example often of you have a friend who calls and says, I would really love you to come to this party. I'm throwing a party and I want you to be there. Well, you love this person. They're a really good friend. You don't want to disappoint them. So you decide you don't like parties, but you decide to go for this friend. And you know that this friend is a social butterfly, and she's going to be the only person you know when you get to the party. And you imagine yourself as you get ready to go to the party, you imagine yourself there, not knowing anybody, and she's off flitting around with other people. She's not going to have a lot of time for you. And so you create this situation where there you are, your self-assessment is, I'm not really good at starting conversations or carrying on conversations with strangers. So I'm just going to stand there looking like a fool, right? I might be, or I might try to talk to somebody and they'll think I'm an idiot. I'll be embarrassed. I'll be rejected. I'll be ridiculed. One of those three things are coming up. And the more you think along those lines, the more the distasteful going to the party becomes. And sometimes we just talk ourselves out of going altogether. So we call our friend and we say, I'm really not feeling well. I'm sorry to miss the party, but I'm just not feeling well. What's happening is that fear factor has prevented us from moving forward. And we've looked at illegitimate fears and let those fears decide for us what we're going to do. The way to change that is to create something that's doable. So when we're looking at illegitimate fears, we're looking at worst case scenario. And so if we have two options, we have best case scenario. Best case scenario, I get to the party and I'm the life of the party. Everybody loves me and I'm having such an awesome time. Well, if your history doesn't validate that, that will shut you down. Worst case scenario is I get there and I make a fool of myself and I'm standing there all by myself and I'm bored out of my mind. And that's worst case scenario. Both of those are going to shut you down. But between the two of those extremes, there's a believable outcome. So let's say for you, the believable outcome is I'm going to go to the party and I'm going to make it a goal to meet two people. And it doesn't matter how that meeting goes, good, bad, or indifferent. They'll either love me, they'll not love me, whatever the outcome is. My goal is just to meet two new people. And when you go and that seems like a doable goal, just to walk up and talk to two new people and see how it goes. No expectation in the meeting, just let's see how it goes. Now you go with an outcome that you can win. It's a small step in a direction of helping you to become more effective at meeting and talking to people. And then you say, okay, and people are always interested in themselves, so I can ask them questions about themselves and get them to start talking. Now we have a plan to go to the party. And rather than looking at the illegitimate fears and letting those control our outcomes, now we've taken an unknown and we've made a known out of it. A known being there's going to be people there and I can meet two people. That gives us a whole different focus. And now the fear isn't going to stop us from moving forward. So Emerson said, do the thing you fear and the fear will disappear. That's true if you do it in small steps, because the subconscious mind and the brain likes to win. And when you do something and you succeed, there's these feel-good chemicals that flood your brain, and the brain says, oh, that's lovely, I want more of that. So if you do the thing you fear in small steps, so for example, I didn't learn to swim until I was an adult. And I learned to swim because my children could semi-swim and they would get in the deep end of the pool. And the thought of one of them getting in trouble and starting to drown and I couldn't save them was a bigger fear for me than the fear of ridicule, rejection, or embarrassment as an adult trying to learn to swim. So when I decided to learn to swim, I went to a nearby lake and I swam up and down the shoreline where I could touch the bottom. I didn't go jumping 20 feet of water without knowing how to swim. So when we do the thing we fear, and the fear does absolutely disappear because it's inoculation. We become inoculated to that particular fear. So for me, swimming up and down the shore, knowing I could touch the bottom if I needed to, was how I learned to navigate water. And the first time I knew I could swim is when one of my sons lost his skis, water skiing, and I jumped off the boat to go help him put his ski on, and I realized I'm in water way over my head, and I'm swimming. But that's do the thing you fear, so that the fear disappears. Do it in doable steps so that you don't overdo it. Because then history, if you try something too big and you fail at it, then your history is going to go, well, I don't want to try those things because that results in failure. So try it in ways that results in success. One small success leads to a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until you have some really big successes.
Yeah. To me, one of the things that really sticks out as you're talking about this slide is how our subconscious mind always, always, always goes to the worst case scenario. And if we look back on our lives and our history, how many times does the worst case scenario ever happen? Right? It's almost, it's such a small fraction percentage of the things that could happen in our lives. Worst case scenario very, very rarely happens. But that's where our subconscious mind always goes when it gets into that emotional spiral.
Well, and that's because the protector is so busy trying to keep you safe that, the champion on the other end of the scale trying to tell you how wonderful you are and how you can just do anything. Um, it's less noisy than the protector is. So yeah, we're often telling ourselves the worst case scenario is going to happen.
Yeah, and you think about it, 35,000 decisions a day. How many messages a day do we get? And if you think about the messages that we get, everything is telling us it's pointing towards the worst case scenario. You know, pill for this, a pill for that. You got this disease, you got that disease. There's just messages. Always telling us the negative things that could happen and trying to stoke that fear, so that we focus on the fear side of things rather than the champion side of things.
Right. And we know all of our own foibles, don't we? We know ourselves well enough that we see all the things we do wrong, right? And we don't know other people that well. We if we're comparing ourselves to other people and we don't see all the things they can see about themselves, but we see them about ourselves. Yeah, we tend to look at it's that 1,000-piece puzzle thing we've talked about before, right?
Yeah.
That one missing piece.
All right. So the last one is to develop COP awareness. We like to think about this as, we like the acronym COP because it really, if you think about traffic cop, if we notice the road that our thoughts and feelings are traveling, it's kind of like, when you come to an intersection where the street lights are out, right? They're just all flashing red. It's like everybody's trying to guess as to who should go first or who should go second, who should go next kind of thing. And so it becomes this, kind of quagmire of problems. So if we become aware that our thoughts or feelings are traveling, in that stuck indecisive mode, um, and we step back from that and say, okay, first of all, I need to recognize and honor what my champion is doing. And that's the part of us that's seeking pleasure. Then I need to recognize and honor what my protector is trying to do, and that's part of us that's trying to avoid pain. And then recognize and honor the observer, part of you that simply observes and informs wisely. And really, it's just when we recognize and honor each of those three players, the champion, the protector, and the observer, it's if we ask ourselves, what are they saying? What is my champion saying? It's saying, oh, you can do this, or it's a most logical choice to make. There's no reason you can't do this. Or protector saying, yeah, but what if it goes wrong? What if this, what if that, plays the what if game. If we just recognize that those messages are going on and they're happening, they're just happening below our awareness. And then if we recognize what each of those is saying, and then ask ourselves, what is the observer saying? If we step back from the emotional aspect of it, say, what does the wise observer say? He can see the illegitimacy of each of those opposite ends of the spectrum, and that there's something doable in the middle, in between those two ends of the spectrum. And that's where the observer comes into play, as the traffic cop, right? As to mediate and facilitate that conversation between the protector and the champion, so that we can make a more wise decision based on the awareness of what each of those two extremes are doing for us,
Or trying to do, yes.
trying to do. They just don't know how, because they're operating in isolation, if you will, not paying attention to what the other one is doing.
Yeah, so you've got extreme pessimism and extreme optimism, and both of those can get us in trouble.
Yeah, and it becomes like an internal tug of war going on inside of ourselves. There's, each of these the protector and the champion, each pulling on the end of the rope, and it leads to it's a stalemate, right? Which shows up as indecisiveness.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add to that, Sherry?
No, I think you covered it really well.
Okay. So the 3 action steps that we've identified for this session is to practice the COP awareness. Anytime we find ourselves with a decision to make that we're stuck on for some reason, step back and say, okay, what is my champion saying? Ask her, become aware of what he's saying, and ask ourselves that question. What is my protector saying? And then and then ask what the wise observer in the middle is saying, and that helps us. That awareness and understanding of what each of those three players are saying allows us to make a decision much more quickly.
Almost all indecisiveness is the result of being in an emotional space. It's well known that all decisions are made emotionally. They either feel right or they feel wrong. So even though we think that we're using logic to justify our decisions. So we're not using logic to make the decisions. So if we're in that emotional space where we're wondering, we're feeling fearful, or we're feeling overly courageous, the courage is not the bad end of it, it's that fearful end, it's that worrisome end. So if we're embroiled in that, in the emotional space, then sometimes we get stuck. And again, it's like Kevin described, that congested intersection where you need a traffic cop to move the traffic through. When we're in emotional space, that's when we get stuck. So the observer allows you to step away from emotion and look at it from a non-judgmental and a non-emotional space.
Yeah. B, the step is to journal about important decisions and to help clarify our options. And because for some people, this is a good way. Otherwise, the conversation is going on in our head. It becomes a sort of this infinite loop, and it's just like the conversation is on repeat, cycle, if you will. It just keeps playing over and over and over again. But sometimes stepping back and journaling about it and maybe writing down, what is our champion saying? What is our protector saying? What is our wise observer saying? Helps us to clarify our options. And then another thing that we can do in journaling is to ask yourself, what might I try if I knew I couldn't fail? Or what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And write down the answer to that. And just the process of writing things down gets it out of that endless loop in our heads of indecisiveness, and helps us become much more aware of what our choices are, so that we can then make a more rational or unemotional decision, and actually make a decision rather than being stuck in that emotional loop. So some people like to write things out. Another way to do this, accomplish the same thing and get things out of our head, is to have that same conversation with a trusted advisor. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to ask for advice. Sometimes, if it is a trusted advisor, sometimes it is good to get their advice. But oftentimes, just verbalizing what's going on in our head and hearing ourselves speak it out loud takes the emotional out of it, and allows us to say, oh, when I say it out loud, it doesn't make any sense. Why am I afraid of that? That doesn't make any sense. That's not, the chance of that happen are slim to none, right? So just verbalizing those thoughts that are going on in our head, or journaling them, writing them down, takes the emotion out of it and allows us to more objectively ask those questions. What is our champion saying? What is our protector saying? What is our wise observer saying?
And I always advise people, and I really believe this is the best path forward, is to go as far as you can on your own, because by doing that, you won't know what you're capable of until you do that. But don't get stuck. I've known people that have been stuck at a transition point, something they don't know how to get over, under, around, or through themselves for years. Don't do that. So talking things through with a trusted advisor helps us to process information. Writing it down, again, is another way to process information. Just recognize that we go through life. Most people go through life probably 90 to 95% of the time okay, moving forward to some degree. It's those transition points where we get stuck that slow us down and prevent us from moving forward. That's when you go seeking advice. That's when you go looking for some other option. So just don't stay stuck at that wall.
Yeah. That, discussing options with a trusted advisor, that's really one of the benefits of coaching, right? Is it provides a safe space to have those conversations with people that don't have an agenda, but are just, other than having your best interest at heart, It's not an employee, it's not a boss, it's not a spouse, it's not a child, somebody that has their own dog in the hunt, so to speak, with the outcome of the decision. It's just a safe space to verbalize and discuss what's going on in our brains. And I've got two young adult daughters, and one of the things that when they come to me about some issue, whatever, I oftentimes ask them the question, so do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to give you advice? Right. And oftentimes they'll say, I just need somebody to listen so they can verbalize what's going on in their brains. And just by the process of them having somebody to listen and verbalize it to, they're able to then work through whatever the issue or the decision that they're trying to make is, without me ever saying, anything other than just being that sounding board of that listening ear. All right. So with that, I want to open it up for thoughts, feedback, questions, comments.
Comments, criticisms, whatever. Any questions? Hey,
I
Cindy.
don't have a question right now. This is Cindy, but I did spend some time with my daughter this weekend, and I tend to criticize myself and to be very hard on myself. And my daughter just finally looked at me. Keep in mind, she's 30. She looked at me and said, "Don't make fun of my mom."
I love it.
Stop, because I have always taught her to do the things that you're talking about now, but I sure didn't practice what I was preaching that. So
But
I really out of this because I have been feeling lately with my job, just like that, kind of. I've lived my life thinking about the worst case scenario. I always expect the worst, hope for the best, and it usually falls in between somewhere. And I know this, and that's just what you just said. So why would you anticipate and feel the anxiety and stress of the worst when you know it's probably not going to happen? And yet that's my philosophy.
Well, and change that, Cindy. Start looking for what is a doable option between best and worst case scenario. What's a doable option? And if you start looking that way and you start thinking that way, you're going to always find a doable option.
Yeah. Consult the wise observer. That is a very, very, very powerful technique.
Yeah.
It's just, for being our own best coach is to consult our wise observer and ask them, well, what would you do? Because the wise observer always knows the answer. They always know the right answer. We just take the time, and it only has to be, oftentimes it only has to be 30 seconds or a minute or, conversation with the wise observer. It doesn't, it's amazing how fast the wise observer comes up with an answer. If we just stop to ask it.
Yeah. So Titus, you are unmuted. Do you have a question? Comment?
I just want to say thank you. I got a lot more out of this than I figured I would, so very appreciated.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Glad you were able to join us this morning.
And thank you for being here too, Titus. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Dan, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Sorry, it took me a second to find that audio button. No, not necessarily. I got a lot out of it. I feel like number one, I appreciate you guys doing this. The one thing that really stuck out, I feel like I make um, decisions well, but not quick enough. Sometimes it's not procrastinating, but I don't like to make quick decisions. And when I'm forced to make quick decisions, my stress, um, I immediately made the connection. And my first thing is anger. That's my sign when I know that I'm stressed is I go into anger mode. And to have the cop mentality. I think the anger is my protector.
Mhm.
In my view, I'm not, I'm not that intelligent as far as my psychological uh, brain, I guess, thinking process. So I have a really difficult time once I hit the anger stage of interacting with people. So I got a little bit more out of it than just the decision making. I think that might help me um, in other areas of my life when I'm in confrontations. I I avoid confrontations, and I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is sometimes I can be the one that makes a conversation confrontational because I get stressed and then my anger. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense, but I would like to suggest something, Dan. By the time you get to anger, you're way down the road. Something happens long before you get to anger. Your body tells you something. Your body tells you stress is going up long before you get to anger. Anger, you're already way down the road at anger. And at anger, it's really hard to rein it back in and start and move into a kind, considerate space because you're already angry. So if you go into and you think about a stressful situation and you think about it just from what the space you're in right now, and you notice what your body does to let you know that you're thinking about something stressful. Your body is going to let you know something. Again, it's going to be tension, muscle tension, it's your heart racing, shallow breathing, something in your stomach. Something shows up early, long before you get to anger.
Okay.
And if you think about something stressful right now and you notice what your body is doing, not your brain, your body. What's your body doing when you're thinking about a stressful situation?
Tingling right now.
Tingling?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah, a
Good.
little.
Okay, perfect. That is your early stress response. So what you're feeling right now, that is an early stress response. You're not angry yet. You're in total control there. So rather than letting it go way down the road to where you get to anger, notice that at that point when your body starts giving you that tingling, what you're feeling right now, to know that's a stress response. That's my early response. And here I'm in control. Here I can reduce my stress levels and I don't have to get to anger.
I will practice that. I certainly appreciate that. And I it's probably straying from your uh, um, lesson today, I suppose, but I do appreciate that because that's what jumped out at me immediately. I'd like to take my time making decisions to make sure that I make the right decision. And like I said earlier, when I'm forced to make that, it's I get that fear of the unknown. I think drives that anger in me because I don't know. That's my it's that fight, flight, or freeze, and that's what I get and it's internal. I don't mean that I'm, fisticuffs with someone. It's an anger within myself that I can't,
Yeah.
that I'm a little bit afraid.
So
Well,
when it comes to making quick decisions, what you're probably doing is you're going into those three big fears: embarrassment, ridicule, rejection, right? If I make the wrong decision, this bad thing is going to happen, right?
Yep.
And so looking at that and recognize that if you follow something through to its conclusion, so I make a quick decision and it's a bad decision, so what? And your so what's going to give you an answer as to why that's stressful for you. So what? So the person that I make the decision for, things are going to go south. Things are going to be bad. Okay, things are going to be bad. So what? Okay, so if things are bad, then this is the next effect, result of that, right? And if we keep following so what to its final conclusion, we'll recognize that it's usually an illegitimate fear. And then we recognize that, if I'm embarrassed, if this is a not, if it, and what you're probably doing is catastrophizing. You're looking at a non-fixable outcome. And that rarely happens. We rarely have something happen that's non-fixable, unless we do something that's going to kill somebody or right, or ourselves, or permanently damage somebody. Almost everything is fixable. So if you follow that thinking path all the way to the end, you'll know what's keeping you from making quick decisions. But slow decisions are actually wise most of the time, aren't they? And if you look at
Absolutely.
and if you look at what's necessary for you, how frequently do you really have to make quick decisions? How frequently does that occur?
Well, in my role here, it occurs quite a bit. Um, so I don't have a number per day or per week or per month or anything like that, but I just feel like that's one reason I wanted to jump on. I saw this, and I know um, one of my faults is indecisiveness sometimes in quick, rapid decisions that have to be made. And I do, you're absolutely right. I tend to, and I hate to hijack this for anybody else here. So, but I tend to go down the rabbit hole and quickly try to look at every single thing that can happen. And then there's another side of my brain that's saying, well, if this happens, then this is going to happen. And my wife tells me all the time, you're getting too deep, but it's the way my mind functions that I'd like to make that decision a lot faster. But I want to make sure that it's the right decision. And I'm trying not to continue to go down that path of, well, if this happens, then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. I'd like to be able to get myself to that. So what? This everything in my body is telling me that this is the right decision, but then there's that little hole over there that I keep trying to get through to see, all right, but what's the brick wall on the other side of that?
Right, and what that tells me is that you're spending a lot of time listening to the protector. And that protector's, what if this happens, and what if this happens, and what might go wrong? Shift your focus on purpose to the champion. And what is the champion telling you? So the champion is going to be, so if you've got the protector saying something like, what if this goes wrong and you make a really big mistake and things go south and it's all your fault, right? That's the protector. And the champion says, but what if you make this decision and it turns out to be a good decision, right? And you're smart. You know your job. You know the world you live in. You're aware of that. That's what your champion's going to say to you. And your observer is going to say, between those two extremes, there's a doable thing. Let's bring the protector and the champion together and help you find that middle ground that'll let you move forward quickly. And oftentimes, how many times have you made a quick decision that went south? How many?
Well, I'd like to say not many.
There you go. There you go. See? And when you become aware of that, you're aware. I usually make really good decisions. Those quick decisions, although they're stressful, they usually are good decisions. So I'm a good decision maker. It changes the approach to decision making. If you recognize I'm a good decision maker, I rarely make a bad decision. I rarely make a decision that leads to a bad outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many
My
times
wife might disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how many times Sherry's asked me, what does your wise observer say? And it only takes a second to somebody ask me that question, her to ask me that question, what does your wise observer say? And I as soon as I consult my wise observer, it's like the answer is there. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Right. So it's very calling on, recognizing those three personas, the cop personas, and being able to call on that wise observer at any moment in time, you can get a very quick decision with a very, very good outcomes very fast.
Well, I appreciate that. Not like I said earlier, that was my big takeaway, and I'm going to put that into practice. So I appreciate it. Like I said, I know your guys' time's getting short, and I want to make sure that if anybody else has anything, I certainly appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here. And thank you for that feedback too, by the way, because that's really useful to have a real life example. It's very useful to do that. Thank you for that.
I just want to reassure Dan, he didn't hijack anything. That was good advice all the way
It
around.
was
So
all
thank
the
you.
way around, yes.
Yeah, we learn from each other's experiences, and when we share like that, our own experience, our own issues or whatever, it feels like we're hijacking or taking over the conversation. But those are the best parts of these meetings,
Yeah.
is because everybody else learns from those experiences and those examples. So thank you for sharing that, Dan. That was not hijacking in any way, shape, or form. That was adding tremendous value to this conversation.
And thank you, Titus, for stating that.
No problem. Thank you all. It was very informative. I'll look forward to the next one.
All right, as we wrap up just real quickly, two things here. One is for those, if you know anybody that, one of the things that Sherry and I do is a LEAP program, which is Leaders Equipped to Actualize Potential, which it goes beyond the typical skills and knowledge and tactics and delves deep into the foundational factors that drive performance and productivity. So that's just kind of our shameless plug, if you will, for that program. If you know your organization, or if you know any organizations that would be interested in that, this is a little quick overview of that program. It really focuses on foundational insights and self-discovery process, predictable and retainable information, and it's really an empowerment program for all people involved. And leadership is not a position of authority or rank. It's about leading ourselves well first and inspiring other people to want to follow. So this LEAD program is really for all individuals that want to become self-leaders. So just a quick overview on that. And then lastly, is next month, the topic will be self-leadership, which is the most important kind of self-leadership, because all leadership starts with leading ourselves well, right? If we lead ourselves well, we set a great example, and that inspires other people to want to follow. And self-leadership really, and inspirational leadership is the purest form of leadership, because there's really nothing we can do to other people to lead them other than set an example that inspires that they're following.
And there's no great leader who isn't good at leading themselves. There is no such thing.
Yeah. So next month will be August 14th, and it'll be the same time, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 11 o'clock Central, or 12 p.m. Eastern. And if you know anybody that on your teams or in other organizations, this is free. We encourage people to invite other people to join us if you got something out of it, and think other people on your team or other businesses or other organizations that you think would benefit from hearing what Sherry and I have to share on some of these topics. We would strongly encourage you to invite them. And you can send Sherry an email or myself an email. Our email address there at the bottom, Sherry@starperformancesystems.com or Kevin@strongpeoplesystems.com. Just send us an email and we'll add them to the invitation list and make sure that they get registered.
And if something comes up for you, there's our email addresses there too.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're always happy to be a sounding board or bounce ideas off of, or brainstorm ideas, kind of thing. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and stop the recording.